Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is June 11th, 2018, and I'm broadcasting to you live from my apartment in New Jersey, the most exciting place known to the cryptosphere. I'm joined today by people from around the world because cryptocurrency is an international phenomenon. I'm joined by my good friend, Joshua Shigala from Berlin, also from Voltoro. What's up, Josh? That's really great, Josh. I love your enthusiasm, but I also want you to hit the mute button.
Oh, there we go. My God. The whole time I was talking, telling people about
No,
mute
you
button.
can't tell anybody about the
whole
mistakes
time.
that we made at the beginning of the show. What the effing hell? Forget it.
No. So, hey, we just find, by the way, listeners, we are on the iTunes store.
No, this is the worst show opening ever. Time out. We're fucking starting over. Josh, if we ever have a mistake in the beginning, we could just edit it out. You don't need to talk about it later on. So let's start this over again. I
love our mistakes.
No, I don't. Actually, I want it to be like a professional show. Jesus Christ.
All right.
This is like a comedy. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is an unblemished June 11th sunshiny day here in New Jersey. And I'm just, telling you all about crypto stuff. My friend Josh. Josh is broadcasting to us live from Berlin for the first time today, I assure you. And what's going on, Josh? How you doing?
Going well. Things are moving. Crypto's tanking like a mofo.
No way.
Oh my God.
The markets are so bad. I looked at them yesterday. I was like, what is this bloodbath?
I know. And like EOS has launched their main chain and then crashed like 25%. It was just like, I was like, what?
Wait, so I want to know what happened with EOS because I don't own any EOS and I know that people are really hot for it. But wait, before we get into this, why don't we bring in our guest? Because I think our guest is really cool and he looks so animated and like enthusiastically engaging with what we're talking about. So we're going to break protocol and we're going to bring on Francis Pouliot. I think I'm saying it properly. That was, when you want to say something in French and like fake it, you got to be like, bleh, and then people believe you. Francis, you got to hit the mute button and then we can chat with you. Hey, what's going on, bud?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Tatiana. And hi, Josh. And hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm broadcasting from Montreal, Canada. It's also very hot today. And it's a really nice day for us.
Very cool. I don't spend enough time in Montreal. I got to spend some time in Toronto, which is where I saw Francis. And I was like, oh, wow, we have to have him on the Tatiana Show. But I was in Montreal one time and I did enjoy it very much. I've heard it's like a sexy town. That's what I know about Montreal. That's all I know.
It's Vice City. Like people don't understand. It's complete Vice City. Like it's been cleaning up, getting a bit more family friendly over the past like 20 years. But historically, Montreal is like where all the parties are, all the restaurants are. Definitely a really great place to live and be in the summer. Actually, the Grand Prix just ended last weekend, so yeah, summer's kicking off and it's pretty crazy down here.
Yeah, I got to make my way up there at some point. I was thinking maybe over the summer I'll get up there in Niagara Falls. Okay, so EOS, guys, tell me what's up with EOS. I know that people think that EOS is sort of BS-y. That's what I know. I know some people think it's really great. And then I know that they did this big launch thing. And so tell me, was there a shit show to be found?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you think, Francis, but I mean, it's interesting tech for sure. Dan Larimer has been in the game for a very long time. He's been obsessed with proof of stake for a very long time, or delegated proof of stake. In fact, Satoshi Nakamoto told him to shut up because he doesn't have time to explain why it doesn't work. But
literally,
but we'll see. What happens now that they're launching. I'm not a biggest fan on the whole voting thing, voting for delegates. I think it's against the sort of ethos of, hey, everyone just have a go and everyone jump in and run and help secure the network. I think that's kind of the nicest way to go. I mean, what do you need to vote for? How are you going to get information about who they are anyway? They should stay anonymous. We shouldn't have trust inbuilt in the system. We should just route around bad actors when they appear.
But wait, did it launch?
Yeah, so
that was more my question. Like, did it work when it launched? Everything's okay?
It hasn't launched. They're voting for these delegates now. So, on Bitcoin, any miner can jump in that's got some CPU or ASIC and start mining this thing, but Bitcoin. But with EOS, no, you have to get voted in So the main chain's kind of running. It's up, it's live, except it's not running until you get like 15%. Is that right? I don't know, Francis, if you know more about this than me. But
I don't know much about how EOS works, to be honest. I do know about the voting though, because I think now there's 21 delegates that they're trying to choose. Correct?
Right.
I think it's only 21, right?
Wow. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Or something like that. So dedicated proof of stake, for the listeners, is kind of the idea that if you're kind of a coin holder, you can vote for a kind of intermediary representative, and they're gonna have some custodianship over the network related to governance, or some coins, for example, like Dash, it had a budget for marketing, that kind of stuff. What's interesting is, like, if you have, I was looking at who's applying to become like an EOS like validator, and almost all of them are like these regional associations, like Bitcoin, like EOS Canada, EOS Italy, and like I've been in those groups like for a long time, and the first thought I had is like, wow, so there's going to be 21 internal power struggles going on in the EOS community, where everyone's fighting for that key, which is the validation key. There's only like, I don't know how it works, but ultimately there's like a signature of some sort, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting, like not only like within the EOS ecosystem, like all these groups, and we like within those groups as well, is going to create a lot of problems. And I think the EOS, there's already two networks, because I think like some of the validators, they're like, oh, they want to launch EOS and keep the name. Two groups want to launch different EOS blockchains and keep the name EOS. Really? I think that's what's going on right now, and I think they're both building like incompatible blockchains. Like they will not be compatible within one another. There's like a slight difference going on there. But in terms of the launch, like I haven't checked the price at all. Like it can't be good that the network is launching for the price, in my opinion, because like the expectations of this thing are so high. I mean, there's almost, it's EOS, they crammed everything they could into this blockchain, right? Like every possible feature you can imagine, unlimited transactions, smart contract, privacy, governance, like everything is like crammed into this one thing. So I can't imagine that those extremely high expectations can ever be met, right? So I don't know. I think I actually haven't been looking at the price of Bitcoin for a while. I have kind of unplugged, and I haven't plugged myself back into these things. But
hey, when Star Wars came out with the first thing, when Jar Jar Binks, there was so much hype. The new Star Wars, it had been 30 years or whatever. And then that came out, and everyone was so disappointed, because you just can't live up to hype like that. And I think this is going to happen.
Wow. Well, episode 1 of crypto.
Yeah. So anyway, but actually, one thing that the price reminds me, this big launch and the price tank's 25% on EOS. It really, and I keep saying it, guys, there's no such thing as diversification in the crypto markets. There really isn't. I mean, kind of there are little subtle diversifications in terms of moving on which one's crashing faster than the other, but generally when Bitcoin goes up, the whole market goes up. When Bitcoin goes down, the whole market goes down. Whether they go down a little bit percentage more or less, that's the only diversification you get.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Totally 100%. And I also see the same thing for people that have all of their assets based in fiat as well. So same argument, you might think you're diversifying between bonds and stock, and you are to some degree, but on a long enough timeline, you're not really diversifying, because all your assets are denominated in and influenced by, monetary policy and that kind of stuff. So they all have the same, centralized risk of failure. And with Bitcoin, I totally agree. You're not really diversified at all. And, you're also taking a huge systematic risk when you're going to altcoins. So going into altcoins is an aggressive policy. It's not supposed to be the safe kind of fallback, according to me. It's supposed to be like for more aggressive moves. So that's the way that I kind of see it. And especially with these things like EOS, like people need to be careful, because I think we've all been into the crypto game for a really long time, and we all know these communities. There's guys that spend their entire days just looking for all the loopholes in the protocol, all the kind of incentives. Like if you look at Steam, you got a very few amount of like Steam posters, Steam Canadian members. So when you're getting into these things, like you need to really understand you're competing with some guys that are dedicating a lot of energy, a lot of resource into this new coin, and you're really like a fish. So when you look at those networks, it's kind of like how easy it is for me to participate and get those insights. EOS is a really tough one to crack. It's very, very complicated. And in order, I think, to successfully make, money investing in EOS, you'd have to be really, really, really involved and really understand that whole game. These proof of stake networks, they're not straightforward at all. So it requires an investment of time and resource to really be successful in those markets.
Didn't they raise like a bananas amount of money? Isn't that why? Because to me, that seems like a little bit sketchy, right? I don't know.
4 billion. 4 freaking billion.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, why did everybody give them all that money? Because here I am, right? I'm thinking, I don't know much about this stuff at all, but I'm thinking, this doesn't seem like a good thing to invest money in. But obviously, people put a bunch of money in there. And from what I understand, I mean, Larimer is very smart, but doesn't he leave all of his projects? So why isn't anybody concerned about that? That doesn't seem like a very good use of money in the system. I mean, I'm all about experimentation and stuff, but I don't know. Does that resonate with anybody? Am I off base?
Well, yeah. I mean, for sure. Like this is like his 5th blockchain, right? And I think a lot of the community of Steem and BitShare is also just transported itself into EOS, and they're kind of following Daniel Larimer as they go along. And there was a lot of he was one of the first people to actually do like airdrops in order to finance projects. People don't really remember that, but back in the day, there was BitShares. And then there was an attempt at a pre-mine, which was going to be the payoff for the chain developers, but the pre-mine didn't work. It's kind of like one of those stories of crypto. Like he thought he was going to have an advantage with the mining software that he was the only one who knew about. But a lot of people knew reverse engineer his software. And then to cover for that, there was the Angel Shares airdrop and the Proto Shares airdrop, which were like forks of BitShares, like snapshots of BitShares. And then there was Steem, and then now there's EOS. So he's a smart guy, and the reason why people invest in that is, I'm not sure what people are investing in per se. I think a lot of people are investing in the ability of the EOS organization to generate, market share, right? Quick market share. Like the launch of the EOS blockchain was at Consensus 2017. And for those of us who were there, when we got there, we're like, what the hell is EOS? EOS didn't exist, and everything was sponsored by EOS. They had private parties where they would make you, chant EOS to get champagne and, really over the top kind of stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, I want to invest in this, right? I definitely believe in these guys' ability to generate some hype around their product. I didn't because it was too complicated, and it was like a never-ending ICO for like a year.
Yeah,
anyway, very complicated.
Never-ending
but that doesn't sound like a real thing. Like people are investing in the hype. I mean, isn't it like they're like investing in the pump and dump?
I don't know. Maybe people don't really know. This is like maybe a more fundamental like discussion on like the value of these things, because a lot of people don't understand that although the token, they don't understand that what's scarce and what's hard to reproduce and what's rare, right? So basically, they look at if you look at EOS, you can say, well, you can't double spend EOS, so there's like protection against counterfeiting, right? Like Bitcoin's double spend protection. Okay, so you can have scarce token on there, and I don't know about the monetary policy. I'm assuming there's some kind of limit in there. I'm assuming at minimum there's some kind of monetary policy, so you can say, oh well, it's scarce. But if you look at the token, what it's supposed to do is supposed to unlock some features that are in demand. And if you look at EOS's features, I mean, it's going to be tokenization. People are going to use EOS for tokenization. They might do EOS for prototyping dApps and stuff like that, but they can use like 50 other blockchains to do that, right? So EOS is competing on these things. If you want true decentralized, censorship-resistant computing power that is able, for example, to run a darknet platform without getting shutting down, that's something very truly few blockchains can offer. That's what's really rare about Ethereum. But if you're just trying to kind of launch your business on top of a blockchain, what you're really looking for is, open source applications, open source software that you can readily launch, a free network that you can build your backend on, and some hype from investors, some hype from users. So you're looking at these things. So when people are investing in EOS, I really can't see they're investing in the fundamental value of EOS. Perhaps they're investing in the concept of delegated proof of stake on the short term. And they're hoping that, blockchains might switch to proof of stake, and this might be an interesting use case, which means that people will look into EOS and stuff. So I don't know. From a strategic investor's point of view, I think you're just investing in what what you think the market is likely to be excited about in the next few months, which has nothing to do really with the underlying tech that much.
Yeah.
It's more the ability to market that tech in the right niche at the right time, with the right strategy.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that a lot of people are investing in is they think, oh, look at the mad gains of Ethereum and I missed out. But now there's going to be this next best thing. So you have, instead of a protocol like HTTP where there is no speculation, it's just building cool tech. Yeah. Now you have cool tech with this pump and dump side of it as well. And I'm not saying people will dump it because, they're hopefully not. But at the same time, Casper and all these things built that are getting built into Ethereum will probably happen as well. And when people talk about, the whole poppy thing, the whole tulip fever, I really think that's to do with blockchains. It's nothing to do with tokens.
Yeah, tulips seem more like EOS. EOS seems more like a tulip than Bitcoin. I mean, no, I don't know.
I don't know if it's that. No? It's more like anyone can create blockchains. So they're the actual tulips because you can infinitely make blockchains, but you can't make any more than 21 million Bitcoin, or you can't make any more than a certain amount of tokens. But once you start having multiple platforms, for smart contracts, you have Neo, you have now EOS, you have Cardano, you have Ethereum, you have, and there'll be more.
Absolutely.
Walk away from them. And so we really haven't seen a killer app yet for smart contracts. I mean, apart from conferences, as I say every week, the killer app really
that doesn't resonate with me.
Killer app is kind of CryptoKitties really at the moment, which isn't fully. I mean, I see that.
Well, it's not even it's not even a smart contract anyway, because you don't need Turing completeness to have, in the sense that you don't need CryptoKitties to be Turing complete for it to work, right? You can have like tokenization without having Turing completeness. And I agree with you, like the use cases for smart contracts are kind of weird in the sense, well, taking a step back, people use smart contracts in multi-signature, right? So that's a smart contract that's in play right now. And people use smart contracts for stuff like a Lightning Network. So these are smart contracts that do have definitely some use case. I think the ones that we're talking about right now are the decentralized apps where there's actual, like, the kind of business logic of the app also is not just the payment part, but like the actual business logic, like the users, all the actions. And most of all of the dApps that I've seen are part of some other corporate or some other app, and they're like a module. So I'll have an app which does this, and there's my Ethereum module which makes sure that everything's automated and everything's done, a payment's there, the payout, for example, the payout is done on Ethereum. But since this smart contract is linked to, it doesn't exist on its own, right? It needs to have an app with a board, with a CEO, with developers, with marketing professionals. So it's not censorship resistant. What you're doing is not censorship resistant. So everything is the trade-off that you're making between censorship resistance and efficiency. You're not making it. You're just efficient, right? And you're using this, Ethereum stuff, not for the censorship resistance part of it, but rather because it was easy, because all I had to do was to download a few things and launch, my Ethereum server and whatever. And I had this whole backend like ready to go in like a few days. I could, like months of development cut out by using Ethereum. And exactly as you say, this is not hard to do. This is not rare. These are the tulips. Everybody can make that. And I don't know if you've read or heard about Saifedean Ammous's book, the Bitcoin Standard. And when I read that book, a lot of the kind of intuitions that I had that I was not able to communicate to others were made very clear. And it drives to what you just said now, which is if something becomes valuable, people will produce more of it to make money, right? Yeah. So it will only retain its value if it's hard to do more of it. And what is the it that we're looking for in Bitcoin? I think it's pretty clear. Like the value proposition is the smart contracts that we have are truly decentralized and autonomous. They're not linked to anything. They're used for wallets and Lightning Network channels, that kind of stuff. And there's the censorship resistant and the true trustless nature of Bitcoin, and the scale of Bitcoin that does not compromise with decentralization is something that is only the result of this organic network effects being bootstrapped, right? And the way you bootstrap a network effect is like the same way that we all got into Bitcoin, is that it was kind of irrational for us to bootstrap the Bitcoin network, right? Because we were making the first move without other, we were taking that first risk, is because we were ideologically driven and motivated, right? We were investing in the future for our kids and ourselves. And it's really hard to redo that over time. Like you look at Bitcoin now, it's all these tiny things that were built up together. That's how it works. So reproducing this in an organic way is almost impossible. So that's the way I look at EOS. But you got to remember, I was the kind of guy that told people to sell Ethereum at $1. Because I was looking way too far ahead. I was thinking in philosophical terms about Ethereum, how to me, in the long, time span of humanity, it doesn't really make sense if you have Bitcoin. But the market will stay irrational much, much, much longer than any of us can ever be solvent. So particularly if you're not, a wealthy investor, don't bet on a rational market, right? So these kind of analyses that we have are more educational, because really I've understood all these years the fundamental value proposition of these blockchains should reflect in the price of the coin, and should reflect in the opportunity cost and stuff like that, but it doesn't. So be careful. I don't want this to be investment advice against EOS. Actually, I'm probably a reverse indicator. So if I think a coin has really bad fundamental value proposition, and it's all hype, it's probably a good idea to buy into it, at least for the medium to short term.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I feel like we went off down the EOS rabbit hole, which is cool, but I wanted to get back to, what motivated you to be in crypto. And, one of the reasons why I brought you on the show was because you had discussed some of the technical aspects of cryptocurrency in a way that even I found compelling, which was a miracle in itself. So I wanted to maybe share some of that with the audience, but maybe a little bit of background as to, how you came into this space would be great.
Yeah, so I actually, I'm happy you say that, because I actually taught myself the technology, and I don't have a background in tech at all. So when I got to the point, like 5 years after Bitcoin, where I could really explain the tech, and people are like, "Oh, do you want to program for me?" And I'm like, "I actually don't program." It's really cool. And the point I'm saying is, like, anybody can do it, right? Anybody can get to this level after just enough time and patience. So, like, I got into Bitcoin from the libertarian perspective. So, like, moving back, I got into Bitcoin in early 2013, and I had just kind of graduated from my master's degree in public policy. And I was fortunate enough to have Austrian economic professors in university and get some internship at some libertarian and Austrian think tanks and stuff. So I read Ayn Rand that summer, and it kind of all fell into place. I was already pretty free market oriented, but it really fell into place. And then I became an activist for free market capitalism, mostly. Also civil and political rights in my own country, in Quebec and Canada. So I was doing like policy analysis. So I was an actual economic researcher, economist, and I wanted to change. I had this idea. I was really compelled by the kind of John Galt entrepreneurial society. And I was like, this is a really good utopia to aspire to. I was kind of a romantic, right? I was looking for kind of a struggle. And that seemed to me like a really romantic struggle, because we're kind of the underdogs. But everyone that I met in the libertarian movement was really kind of consistent. And, I really like that. So I got into that. And then I kind of did a lot of the usual stuff, the kind of pork fest. I was kind of in those crowds debating with academics, and it was like incremental change, right? Our philosophy was incremental change. It was literally something called the Overton window, which people in policy will know about. It's just like you're trying to slowly move, slowly shift the culture, one win after the other towards your end goal. And in libertarianism, like really that doesn't work. I realized the whole system that we're seeing, and I didn't even know about monetary policy back then, but I really felt like we were swimming against the current, fighting a losing battle, and that there was, it's good to have libertarians like pushing on all fronts, but it just seemed like a losing battle. And I kept thinking about this idea of like opting out, opt-in, opt-out, being fascinated by those systems, but didn't really know where to look. So I met some libertarians that were hardcore Bitcoiners, like hardcore. Back in the day, some of them were known. I think you guys probably will recognize their faces from the 2013 conferences and stuff like that. And when I met them, we were talking about libertarianism and kind of those meetups, and they had this pitch which I really fell in love with, which is, we just don't really care about politics. I don't read the news anymore. I'm just building my own world, my own parallel world. And they're like, they gave me the whole spiel. These were guys that it was a private conversation. The whole underlying reason why they were building these mobile apps that look really cool and neat, but behind that, they're revolutionaries, right? These guys are really motivated. So I really got hooked on the pitch, and then I convinced my bosses at the Research Institute to start doing research on Bitcoin, and fell down the rabbit hole on the job, on the clock, which was great. And then eventually, I didn't even publish the paper. One of my colleagues took over. I left, and they started like a trade group that was the Bitcoin Embassy. So back in the day, that was the Bitcoin Embassy. It's gone since about a year. Unfortunately, just because the original founders obviously went on to other projects, and we realized even a year and a half ago, like that trust. I'm happy we closed it, because I could feel as we were bringing on more new people, the brand and the ideology was getting diluted over time.
Yeah,
and
Jax came out from there, right?
Sorry?
No, Jax in Toronto.
Jax was in Toronto. Jax had I think Jax started out the same way as us, and they all moved into private office space, like pretty much everyone. But so it was hard to keep that original vision diluted, and that brand had a lot of cred, but the cred was built because of that kind of original Bitcoiner vision. And if that vision is not there anymore, it kind of felt like a fraud, right? Because I'm certain today that the Bitcoin Embassy would be EOS hotspot, for example, right?
So what do you think of? What do you think of when you go to conferences now? It's just full of bankers and people, screaming more regulation and stuff like this. No, it'll be, people will take Bitcoin seriously if we have more regulation. Yeah. And I think, what are you talking about, you idiot? What do you feel the same way as me? I feel really sort of annoyed at these sort of conferences nowadays.
Yeah, I'm definitely annoyed. I'm definitely super annoyed. At the same time, I was kind of that guy like 4 years ago as well, right? So I think we're lucky enough to have some wisdom and not judge maybe the newbies too harshly, even though they're doing damage, right? So even though like people are actually doing damage, it's important to realize I also was dumb. Like I also was super dumb. But yeah, I'm a bit tired, and I think it depends on the conference you go to. The ones that we have in Toronto, for example, the organizer, Sunny, really does try to ultimately at the end have this underlying message, which is Bitcoin centric, or money centric, like monetary standard centric. It is definitely annoying. And but whenever I go to a conference, I always end up having a good time, because I always see the Bitcoiners hanging out in one section, and then we spend half an hour complaining about the conference, and then another hour and a half talking about our projects and building stuff. So even at those conferences, you can still. But yeah, I'm definitely annoyed with that. I think the movement has
obsession and stuff. It's just like, man, where's the ideology gone? Where's the crypto anarchy?
It's not such a big deal, because these people are still there. I think the only thing that's happening is perhaps the VC funding and the money that should be allocated to some of the projects. Normally, that would be, I think, the best outcome for all. I think the hype is removing some of the potential resources away from those fundamental Bitcoin projects, those disruptive projects. But yes, it annoys me, and actually, I tweeted I left my job as a consultant in blockchain space for almost a month. It was just because I couldn't kind of take it anymore. I was just like, wow, I need to refocus. And when I came back from that vacation, I came back more aware that, all right, the most important thing for me that I can do right now is focus on building the Bitcoin infrastructure, which was really helpful. So now I'm taking a Zen kind of approach, which is, as long as the externalities of this whole hype aren't too bad, and if we can all get some windfall, although a lot of people, they have this mentality also, which is I'll be the Trojan horse. I'll take the banker's money, and I'll advise him from the inside, and I'll do that incremental move, and I'll change the system. And I'm like, been there, done that. You know, that's not gonna happen. It's hard to make happen. So yeah, so so I guess after I started at the Bitcoin Embassy, I was kind of this lobbyist person at the Bitcoin Embassy. Doing, my title was like director of public affairs. So I was doing much of the Bitcoin Foundation like stuff that you would imagine. So drafting the common policy response to government speech or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I did actually, after a year and a half, realize that I was getting people into Bitcoin, but Bitcoin, I didn't like the way it was being built out. I felt like I was bringing people into the community and then just offloading them there, and then they're not being served, and Bitcoin's not as good as it should be. And I'm like, I can't continue to offload that to the same people, because like those people are just turning out to be bad, like one after the other. Not all of them, but a lot of them, right? So that's after a little while, I had some Bitcoin with me and stuff. So in 2016, I got, I started my own business with kind of the activities that we had at the Bitcoin Embassy, and it really grew from there. So I started a company in Montreal called Satoshi Portal, and we build Bitcoin software and Bitcoin apps. And we also operate a few of them. So we have kind of like financial KYC, administrative backend, and some software tools for brokers. And with those tools that we had initially developed to become kind of multi-purpose, we actually bought a company called Bills. Bills was the world's first like Bitcoin bill payment app, which allowed Canadians to pay their bills with Bitcoin. So we bought that. So like that's been running since 2013, the service, and we bought it in 2015. So that's really neat, because that really, my user base are people that will pay their utility bills and credit card bills and their rent and a lot of stuff in Bitcoin. So I'm dealing with the hardcore Bitcoiners, which is a really good position I like to be in, and trying to offer them a little hack to be able to send Canadian dollars without using a bank. So they just have their Bitcoin wallet, and they can send fiat to anyone, even e-transfers and like bills and stuff, without using a bank. So that's really neat. And I also developed an over-the-counter business for people to invest in Bitcoin using this. And obviously that makes sense, because I got people selling Bitcoin to pay their bills. I need to pay their bills with fiat. I can't just hold on to those Bitcoins even if I want to. So I sell that to investors OTC. And so that's my main business. Yeah. So that's kind of the result of my exile, getting which I call just getting like a bird's eye view over the industry, is that I want to invest more in open source software. I want to create repositories for merchants, like BTC Pay Server. For me, Nicolas Dorier is the ultimate example of what this space needs. It's people that are getting feedback from the market through their businesses, and that are kind of that are at the UX of Bitcoin, right? The people that are at the user experience of Bitcoin, and that are willing to take this feedback and say, all right, not as a business, this is what I need, but as an industry, this is the tools and the infrastructure pieces that we think are missing, and building them, right? So this is kind of what I want to do going forward. And obviously, as Tatiana knows, I'm also kind of I really fell in love with understanding the tech of Bitcoin, because I was surrounded by tech guys that trusted me to explain Bitcoin to the public, right? And I'm kind of the typical suit. Back then, I was wearing a tie, right? At work, at the Bitcoin, I had an actual tie, which is impossible for me to conceive. So they made me learn Bitcoin, right? They forced me to learn how mining works and how hashing works.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, because this is what you really got Tatiana going, was to say, wow, someone that can really explain Bitcoin. And just a quick shout out to the live chat viewers. It's me, Boss Lady says hi, and I'd like to give a big thumbs up.
Hey, Summer. Giving her a hi.
I met her at the EOS party in New York at Consensus.
Maybe she knows more about EOS than I do. I'm gonna get a playbook. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's break it down. How can people understand crypto without really understanding crypto?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So so Bitcoin, a lot of people understand a lot of the parts of it. It makes sense, and there's these black boxes that you just trust other people. These black boxes of knowledge, particularly, for example, when we get to mining and that kind of stuff, and I Bitcoin did not make a lot of sense to me. I could not understand mining, how it worked. I didn't understand what a wallet was for a really long time, until I understood the basic concepts of crypto. So the most basic concept of crypto is public key cryptography. This might sound like it's really arcane and complex, but the principles are actually very, very simple. And this is relevant for two things. It's relevant for a concept, before public key cryptography, cryptographic hash functions. Cryptographic hash function is the number one thing that if you don't know anything about the fundamental tech of Bitcoin, that's the first thing you ever should look up, a cryptographic hash function. And the cryptographic hash function has a neat trick which allows everything in Bitcoin to work. And the neat trick is if you enter a piece of data, if you think about a hash function, you have to remember when you were in school and if you saw f of x equals y, right? F parentheses of x equals y, that's just a normal math function. So always think about that format. And the thing that you're putting in there, it can be any piece of data. And whenever you put any piece of data into that math function, it's going to create a random, unpredictable new number, right? So this piece of data entering a hash function will always create one number, which is unpredictable before you pass it through that function. And it also has another neat function, which is no two numbers can ever generate the same hash, right? So if you see a hash, you can know that it's only generated by one number. And that's really useful because that's kind of the black box. And once you have the hash from the resulting output of this math formula, you cannot guess the input that was in it. So it's a one-way function. And these are very unique special types of functions.
Like a fingerprint. So if you take a book or a picture, let's say a digital picture, you put it through this function and out comes like a 24-string number, random number. That's if you change even one pixel in that picture, then that whole number is totally different. And you can't take that number and make the image again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a number of fixed length, right? Using the algorithm that we're using in Bitcoin is SHA-256. It's a cryptographic hashing algorithm. So one of the reasons that's important in Bitcoin is because that's the entire way that blockchains are built upon the idea that if you can prove that the hash has existed, if you can prove that the hash exists at a certain point in time, you can certainly prove that all the data that are used as the input of the hash exists, because otherwise nobody could have created this random number. Nobody could have found this number. So that's the most fundamental part. So cryptographic hash algorithms, and they're used everywhere. So they're used in digital signatures. They're used in mining. The way that a block of Bitcoin transaction is constructed is just by taking all the transactions and hashing them together. So that's the first piece that you need to understand. The second piece that you need to understand is definitely public key encryption. So this is the type of crypto that is used in the blockchain space. And one of the reasons why it's so important to understand is because most of the benefits of blockchain, if you're like a consultant or anybody looking at blockchain, most of the benefits of blockchain are actually benefits of public key encryption and public key cryptography and digital signatures. So if you're talking about public key encryption or digital signatures, you're talking about the same kind of thing, which is, about encryption and digital signatures, you're talking about usually public key encryption. And what's really cool about that is the idea of user-generated secrets or user-generated things that the user generates. So when you're a public key pair is what's used in Bitcoin to identify yourself. It's usually what's used in every ledger-based system in crypto to associate some kind of thing with some kind of identity. What's really important to understand in crypto is that the ownership of anything, the ownership of a key, is derived by the fact that you created that key yourself and that only you know that key. That's really important. So if someone generates a key for you and gives it to you, it's not your key. They can't transfer the key.
Let's just wind it back a little bit, because I think some people, it's really hard to comprehend some of these concepts. So I think the simplest form of encryption is when you take the alphabet And then under A, you make every A a B, and every B a C, and every D an E. So you just shift the whole alphabet one, and you write a word like Tatiana. Instead of writing Tatiana, instead of a T, you'd use the next letter. And so it would come out like a jumbled mess. If you didn't know the cipher, which was everything just shifted one across in the alphabet, then you wouldn't be able to read it. And of course, that's the simplest of ciphers, but this is the key that we're talking about. What makes because is the alphabet fully shifted 3 letters, 10 letters, 20 letters, or something way more complex? This is the sort of key. So you need to know, if you get this weird message, how do I unlock that? What is the cipher? And that's why it's called decipher something.
And the main problem with that, of course, is that if we want to communicate and interact, I need to give you that cipher, right? So I encrypt my message and I send it to you, but then I need to send you the cipher somewhere else, right? So I'll send you an email with an encrypted message, and I have to send you, for example, by mail or over phone, the cipher to decode it. This is obviously the problem, right? So the solution to this problem, which was, okay, we can have encryption, but we still have to share the secret. And obviously, we can't encrypt the secret with the encryption key, right? It doesn't make sense. So these mathematicians, and this is the kind of invention of the cypherpunk movement that was derived from that, they realized that if I can come up with a secret number myself, and from that secret number that only I know, and that's a really large number. It's a very, very large number. And the reason that I know that I'm the only person who has this key is because it's just impossible mathematically to regenerate the same key once, because the odds are so huge, really huge. So there's a really great video on YouTube which explains the math behind, public key cryptography. Is simply people cannot comprehend because the number is so damn large. So if I generate a private key for Bitcoin, the odds of you independently generating a private key for Bitcoin are incomprehensible. But I'll break it down for you. Like, I'm sure people will say that my math is wrong or something like that, but I'm pretty sure that the odds of generating the same private key twice is almost the same as me walking through a wall, in the sense that technically I'm made of empty space because my atoms are floating in between each other, and so is the wall. If all our atoms perfectly lined up, so you think about, it's theoretically possible to guess a private key twice, but it's just mind-blowingly hard. You have to try multiple times the lifespan of the universe times itself. It is something that we can safely say is impossible to reproduce. The likelihood is just too small. So you mentioned
earlier, if you hash something, the likelihood of hashing something is impossible. It's not 100% true. It's improbable to the point of ridiculousness. So the amount of, and I've heard it said some other way. I love the walking through the wall thing, because that is really also a possibility, but highly ridiculously improbable to be impossible. But another one would be take every single grain of sand on Earth and multiply it by every single grain of sand on Earth. So that the number, come on. So
absolutely. It's like if each grain of sand was like a planet, and then you would have to go on that planet and find a grain of sand, basically find that one grain of sand. So you're protected just by the laws of the universe in that sense, right? So you have this secret that only you know, and it's this exclusivity, this exclusivity over that private key, which means that you have 100% of the control from that. So in public key encryption, you have this really unique number. And what you do is you use it to derive a public number, right? So the public number, the public key or the address is derived mathematically from the private key. So the private key is like your seed. It's a secret input. And if you put it in a formula, a math formula, that everybody knows, it'll give you a public key. And anybody with the public key and the formula nobody will be able to guess your private key. So the fundamental lesson here is that you generated yourself this key. You have full ownership. And and this is important, because when you send Bitcoin, what you're doing is you're signing a digital signature. And a digital signature is composed of the private key and a message. And like the hashing function, it's very similar, uses the same math. It creates a unique secret. And everybody can see that unique signature must have come from some guy that had the secret and people can verify that without knowing that I have the secret. So that means that I can have 100% control of a key, and I can show that I control it without revealing it, which is really awesome. So this is the fundamental basis for when we have private communications. I will encrypt a message that is programmed to only be openable with some guy or some girl with a secret, with the secret number from which was derived the public key. So this is how it works. But the fundamental notion here for libertarians is that the property right of assets in the real world is something that comes from you being alive. Nobody gives you these rights. You're born as a human, and you have the right to life, the right to prosperity, and they're not dependent on governments. Governments should recognize them. Yeah, and enforce them for you. The role of government is to recognize that these rights already exist within you and help you enforce them, right?
Yeah,
so
it's a fundamental question.
Yep.
If you own yourself, and because if you don't own yourself, then you're a slave.
Exactly.
And then you follow on. Do these hands that I own myself from, when I make something of the earth, do I then own that? Just like if I stab someone, do I have to own that murder? And the answer is, of course, yes.
Yes.
So what you take responsibility because you have self-ownership, and governments are there to protect that, which I don't believe is sort of the best way to do it. But it is the system right now.
And it's basically, if you think about it, it's this kind of bastardization of a contract that we used to have with our governments back then, which were, we have this right, we recognize it, we will nominate you to solve a coordination problem, which helps us enforce these rights with the least amount of externalities, right? And it evolved into this, bastardized monster of omnipotent state that we have today. But originally, the history of that was it was more of almost an explicit contract with very, very few clauses. Now the clauses are everywhere. But in Bitcoin, and the point is, so the right of ownership is inherent to you, but you have to depend on others to a large degree to protect it. Unless you're like holding money in gold and you're protecting yourself physically with your own, self-defense, which is definitely like a good thing to aspire to do to some degree. But then, you obviously you have to transfer it, and, there's the modern economics. But in Bitcoin, from a philosophical point of view, is the first time we have a right of ownership, both physical and digital, which is bulletproof without a third party, which is, nobody can get that Bitcoin unless you actively collaborate with them to give them part of the math problem. And, yes, they can beat you and they can extort you, but if you refuse, they will never, ever, ever, ever be able to get it. It's not like there's money in the vault and they're holding someone hostage, and just while they wait to penetrate, they won't be able to penetrate that vault. So that aspect of public key encryption, the math part, is important to understand, because that's what shows you that you really do own that Bitcoin. Where is the Bitcoin? When I have Bitcoin, digital. Where are they? Where are they stored? Well, they're stored, the ability, and this is also important to understand how Bitcoin transactions work, because when I'm doing a Bitcoin transaction, if you're a real noob, you might think that I'm moving it from account to account, or that I'm even sending you a file over the internet. But really what you're doing is, if I have the private key, I'm able to write a message. And the way that the Bitcoin network is structured, it's a network which we agree on the rules of which type of message is valid, right? So when you're sending Bitcoin to someone else and exercising your property right, what you're doing is you're demonstrating your property right, you're exercising it, and the network enforces it for you, because you would enforce it for them were you in their situation, right? So really, this right is self-enforced, which is, to me, like mind-blowing and really, really important, really interesting to understand. And lastly, I think, so there's public key encryption, there's cryptographic hash functions. I think one of the things that I mentioned, Tatiana, is Merkle trees. So this is maybe not that relevant for people that are trying to understand Bitcoin's monetary property and why is this really important. But you want to understand Merkle trees if you're building something on the blockchain, or you want to do a project with blockchain, because the way that the way that these pieces of data are put together, and when you see a blockchain project, there's all sorts of benefits. You can they can tell you, oh well, you can identify who did this, who did that. We have all these kind of proofs. We can do a ledger with a transfer of assets on a chain or something like that. Usually, it's these operations that are hashed together in a Merkle tree. So that's why you want to have a look at that. And finally, I think the most important thing, like the fundamental way to understand Bitcoin, is when I start a presentation, I say, nobody understands Bitcoin. It's perfectly normal because there's all these pieces together, and you can only really truly get Bitcoin once you get the big picture, right? Because otherwise, it's hard to explain to someone that has not had the illumination. Because when you have the illumination, like you get it, like you really do get it. So one big part of it is definitely understanding the proof of work of Bitcoin and the network effect of Bitcoin, and that's a whole part. So maybe I'll just add a final part about like one of the fundamental pieces that people need to understand is the function of hash rate in the blockchain, because I think that this is one of the most difficult things to get to understand why the role of miners. And if you don't understand the role of hash rate in your blockchain, it becomes easy to compare proof of stake and proof of work, like they're two types of same cereal, and look at the sugar content and say, oh well, proof of stake is like twice as more fast, so I'll go with proof of stake. So the fundamental problem of a blockchain, and Bitcoin would be great without a blockchain if it could work without a blockchain. So we really need to see like the blockchain is a component of Bitcoin that's required to make Bitcoin work, but also the blockchain is not the technology behind Bitcoin. The blockchain is the result of the Bitcoin process being put in action. Because when you think about it, when you're downloading exactly. Yeah. And the phrase like blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin, it really annoys me, because when you download Bitcoin, you're downloading the blockchain, like you're downloading literally files of blocks. So how can the file of block be the underlying tech? Obviously, file is something that's the output of the system. So we're thinking about like,
we got to slowly wrap this up. I mean, it's super fascinating, though. It really is, and I think we should have you back on to explain this further, because it's something that unfortunately we've got another guest in the pipelines here. But the proof, what you're getting at here is that I mean, what my takeaway is as well is that, folks, this is all important stuff if you want to work on Bitcoin and blockchain stuff and actually code stuff. But at the end of the day, you download an open source application, you have a number on your phone, and you can send part of that number to someone else. And fundamentally, you're sending like you send an MP3 to a friend, except your friend knows that you don't have that MP3 anymore. When you send that number to a friend, they know you don't have that number anymore. And that is the key takeaway. And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So definitely the idea is also like it's interesting to learn the math behind this as a libertarian, as someone who's interested in rights, because what these mathematicians have done and what we've done is we've turned these concepts into practical tools that allow us to free ourselves, right? And these tools are the product of just human ingenuity. It's math, it's open source, and it's just really fascinating. And it's really about understanding that there's no magic in Bitcoin. Nothing is magical. There's no piece of it that needs to be a mystery to you. And if you learn crypto hash function, if you learn public key encryption, the only thing that you need to really get after that is the role of miners in proof of work. And I won't get into it right now, but it's really interesting to understand the role of proof of work, as we'll see, as a service that's being offered to a market competitively. And this service is, I like to call it, it's like a beacon, it's a lighthouse. So when we're Bitcoiners and we're users and we're trying to coordinate ourselves together to run this network, we have a lot of coordination problems. Like, how do we agree on this? How do we agree on that? And we needed to find a way to just agree on something without relying on an arbiter or a judge or something like that, and something that can be faked. So the miners are burning electricity, and just imagine that the more electricity they're putting in, the more bright their light is shining. Let's say we're in the dark and we're trying to find our way, and the miners are just burning electricity in the night just to light up a light bulb. It's so dumb. It's a waste. He's just lighting a light bulb. But we have a rule between us. If we ever get lost, we'll just follow the brightest light. and then we'll find our way, right? So
That's
this
a
is
great
really the
way to put
idea
it.
of the miner works for us to help us coordinate ourselves, and the miner is also one of us most of the time, so we get along very well. So that's my takeaway. So just so you had and we'll talk about it in another episode, but understanding the role of the miner as being this service provider in an open economy is, to me, the key of understanding the decentralization of Bitcoin and why we're paying so much for this inefficiency. And we're paying for this inefficiency because it's the only way to get what we want without a centralized third party. And as we saw, even if we get a slightest compromise into centralization, they'll pull on that thread until it's over, the whole thing's unraveled, and we're just enchained in that thread. So that's it for me, I think. Sorry for going over time, but
no, we're going over, but I like it. I like what we've accomplished. I think we've got a good basis, but hopefully we'll get to hang out at Porkfest. Maybe I'll do some live podcasting
that's
there.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Great for some Bitcoin. I've been waiting to do that for a while.
Oh, very cool. So anyway, thanks everybody. Francis, where can people catch up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter all the time. So that's really the best way to catch me. My DMs are open. If I don't reply, please don't be mad. Their inbox is flooded. And if you want to support my project, just go to bills.com, BYLLS.com. It's my bill payment application in Canada. If you're not Canadian, share it to your Canadian friends. And if not, just give me some feedback on the UI, UX, or anything like that. So if you want to help me, just go to bills.com and give me some feedback.
All right, BYLLS.com. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. We'll be posting this around. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. We're doing another back-to-back episode because I'm traveling. Real quick, I'm going out to Porkfest. I'm going to be representing Zencash there. I'm going to be at Cryptolina. There's a lot of cool things coming over the next few weeks. So check at Tatiana.com and look at the events tab for all the places I'm coming, or go to cryptomediahub.com. And if you want to sponsor the podcast, go to dave@btcmedia.org. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.